Hello? Yeah, that's it. Hi, everybody. My name is Chuck Cook. I'm with the Global Biodata Coalition, and I'm moderating this session. On behalf of the many co-organizers listed up here, I'd like to thank you for coming. Our goal today is to encourage creative thinking with regard to sustainability of infrastructure and data resources, and to encourage discussion of the challenges and opportunities we face in running infrastructures and data resources. So bearing that in mind, to save up your questions, we have 10 speakers, 6 10-minute presentations, 4 5-minute presentations, and we will probably leave questions until the end. We hope to have 15 minutes at the end. If any of the speakers are very short, we may have a few questions in the middle. But otherwise, I'd like to start now with the first speaker, Guy Cochran, who will talk about principles for sustaining the global biodata infrastructure. Thank you.
Great. Well, thank you very much, Chuck, and thanks everyone for coming to the session. So I'm here to talk about the Global Biodata Coalition, which is an initiative that brings together organizations that fund research activities, so the organizations specifically that fund research in the life sciences, so that covers basic biology, biodiversity, biomedicine, and so on. And they come together because they realize that for the success of their research programs, data are absolutely essential, and by extension, the infrastructure that their researchers use to share their data, to process, to analyze, to access other people's data, that infrastructure is critically important. And they also recognize with that there are many fragilities and many risks associated with the infrastructure. It's not as sustainable as one would like. So the coalition comprises, at the moment, 11 member organizations that are the funders from different parts of the world. So they're largely national funding, government-linked funding agencies or councils. We have a couple of foundations. But at any one time, on the bottom right, you see our current observers. At any one time, we have a number of observer organizations that are working. They're somewhere on a path towards membership of the organization. So when we think about the infrastructure, unlike other scientific infrastructures, as we all know here, there's no place you go to, there's no building and there's no big machine. Rather, you have this very distributed ecosystem of interconnected data resources, so databases, services on those databases, tools and standards and so on. And they emerge over time. There's no one at the top saying, right, we need a thing here, we need a database there. It's an emerging system and it's a constantly changing system. So a big part of what we have to do if we want to understand sustainability and work towards greater sustainability is to lay this out, to characterize the landscape. And so a big part of the scientific program at GBC is doing just this. And so we have a sort of continuum of, on the left-hand side here, the big hitter databases, the larger, more generalist databases that are very heavily used and that are very highly connected to other databases. And then you move along to the right-hand side to a sort of long tail of ever more specific and more specialist databases, often smaller and often with fewer users and more specific data types, but nonetheless to their users really still critically important. And so at GBC we run a program to understand, or 2 programs to understand this landscape. On the left-hand side, the Global Core Biodata Resource Program enables us really to get to know and to work with the leaders of these bigger resources. So that's a selection process that we've run so far twice. We'll be running another one, I hope, in the coming year. So this is where the people that run the data resources submit their resources for evaluation by external expert review against a set of defined criteria, and then maybe designated as GCBRs. So then we work with that group of people. We have a forum. We met a couple of weeks ago. We can understand the challenges. We can understand the finances. We can understand the value of the system and the risks associated with the fragility and the fact that there's no coordination or little coordination between funding organizations on this. So we also know that they're fairly distributed, so the map below on the left-hand side shows the distribution of the global core biodata resources. When we move into the long tail, we know there are 3.7 thousand further databases that we can identify. So we have a process we call the inventory. So this is a process where we look for signs of databases that are open for use around the world based on what's described and published in the literature. So that's not a complete, it's not a precise process, but we have some confidence we have around 4,000 databases that are open for use from people around the world. So these are much more distributed, and we can't possibly hope to talk to all of the people that run these, but we do try to build some kind of community amongst those. If you look on the network plot on the right, that's just going to three levels of three levels of relationship between data resources. So this is where data resources use other data resources. So they pull data, they pull a slice of data, they use something that's provided by another resource. And what you see, this is only three levels, but you see but starting on a single data resource. But what you see is that there are some with very many connections. So the nodes of the data resources, the edges are the connections. Some with many. These tend to be the global core biodata resources. And then the smaller resources have a lot of connections, but not quite as many. But everything is highly connected, which means that if you mess around with one thing, with a data resource over here, it's likely to have an impact in some way on a data resource over there. So just to say these are heavily used, we always underestimate when we look for references to data resources and data records within resources, but 9% of publications in the scholarly literature reference the global core biodata resources in some way, and a further 7% reference the other data resources. So that's 16% of publications, the authors are going out of their way to say that they're referencing they're using a particular data resource. The true number I expect will be much higher than that. So the system is fragile because parts of it are at risk. I don't have time to go through much of the evidence. I'll just choose one particular piece of evidence, and this is looking at the number of people that it takes to run the GCBRs. And so we have 52 GCBRs, most of them provided responses to this. And so if we asked them how many people, how many full-time equivalents did you have running your data resource? And we add the number up. So this is across multiple data resources. And it's somewhere between 650, 675 people. And if you look, I won't bother points. If you look from left to right from over the last 6 years, you see it's been fairly constant. So let's assume that that's the right number of people to run all of those data resources. So then we asked this question at the beginning of 2025, so the beginning of this year. We then said, well, how many guaranteed positions do you have? So how much secure funding do you have, measured in terms of the number of people you can fund for this year, then for the following year, 2026, then for 2027, and so on. And so it's fairly stable for the first year.